turn red when we're live, and I'll introduce. Hey everybody, we are back. Sorry about the technical difficulties that we experienced during the last session, but that's what happens when we do stuff live. Today, now we have Dana Wilson and Marguerite Presley Davis. Here we're going to discuss the Black community and finances specifically, and what these two women are doing in those spaces and how we can build generational wealth. And it's definitely something that's a buzzword, a topic of conversation for a lot of folks. But beyond that, a lot of people don't necessarily know where to begin or what that means, or how to practically put generational wealth into an action plan. So I'm definitely here for this conversation. I am personally going to be taking notes. And before I jump into the questions, let's start with some introductions. And Dana, if you could tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself and your business.
Sure thing. And you can hear me okay? Okay. All right, perfect. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Dana Wilson, and I'm the CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. And what we do is we make it easier for consumers like you to find Black and Latinx financial professionals. I've spent over 15 years in financial services. I've worked in banking, insurance, wealth management at corporate firms. And I spent probably the past 6.5 years as an independent investment advisor before making the further leap into financial technology. But it's a pleasure to be here and really looking forward to this conversation.
All right. Thanks, Dana. Marguerite?
Yes, happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Dennis. I am Marguerite Presley Davis, and I'm the founder and CEO of Finance Savvy CEO. And at Finance Savvy CEO, we really focus on financial literacy and helping particularly women of color to be able to build generational wealth through profitable entrepreneurship. So we really focus on how do we turn those small business owners into decision makers with really having the financial impact in mind. I've been in the finance industry for a little over 15 years now. I actually started out my career on Wall Street as Goldman as a financial analyst for commercial real estate, private equity investments. Loved every minute of it, but ultimately wanted to transition to more of the consulting side of things. Did mergers and acquisitions consulting for about a half a decade before I actually started my own retail tech startup. Had an exit from that and was like, what's next? And for me, all leads pointed back to helping women of color, helping people of color, I should say more broadly, really get that financial acumen that's needed to have success when building their own businesses.
Oh, that's amazing. So you primarily focus on small businesses, correct?
That is correct. That is our primary focus area, small business owners, because where I focus is really using entrepreneurship as that key generational wealth building pillar.
Okay. And Dana, just to be clear, you focus more on individuals, correct?
It's a combination. So the financial professionals who are on our platform, they work with individuals, they work with small businesses, they work with companies as well. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. The biggest thing that we want to get across to everyone, especially people of color, is that there is a financial professional for everyone. I think there's always a lot of misconceptions where we feel like, we have to have a ton of money and we have to save and we have to have all these things perfectly allocated before we even sit down and talk to someone. And we really want to try to demystify all of those myths and stereotypes and perceptions that still plague the industry.
Yeah. And there are a lot of myths out there.
Yeah.
Now, and what's interesting, what's weird to me is, there's a lot of people in the Black community who, just don't either believe in financial planning or, have a distrust of, banks and, savings and, how do we, I don't know how we solve for that, but how do you approach people who are skeptical? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, we're going to need a whole day to really unpack a lot of that. But for us, I mean, I think about the industry as a whole, and I'm sure Marguerite can attest to that. It wasn't really meant for us as Black and brown individuals to be successful and as professionals, and also to be seen as wealth creators and wealth generators. We're still, can walk into a bank and still be stereotyped as just going in to possibly cash a check, or just being able to, going in there to get cash, and not really looked at as those, maybe private wealth clients, or those that have money, even if we're making six figures. So when you have a lot of these stereotypes and perceptions and biases that people lay on us as, consumers of color, Black individuals, it's not inviting. How do we put ourselves in a position to feel comfortable in a space that doesn't want us there all of the time?
Yeah. And I'll add to that, Dana, too. I totally agree with what you said. And I think that part of it as well is empowering people of color and educating them with the tools, so they no longer feel that it is someone else steering the ship for them, that they're in control. So I think one of the really important things to build that trust is to educate the community around, how are you making decisions? What is the impact of your decisions? So when they're walking into the bank and they're getting an absurd interest rate, they're empowered with the knowledge to know that, hey, I should be asking these types of questions as it relates to debt service, or I should be asking X question. Why? Because I have the knowledge around what the different terms mean and what are the impacts to my broader financial state.
Yeah, and you mentioned the tools, and this is a good segue to, because both of you have platforms, services, and apps that help, demystify and provide resources for folks who are looking to develop a financial plan. This is my opportunity for you to brag on yourselves and your products. So, I just want to put it out there. Tell us what's so great about what you're doing and how it differentiates from what's out there. And I don't care who goes first.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we're doing specifically with Your Profit Playbook, which is the financial planning tool of Finance Savvy CEO. So again, we focus on entrepreneurs, business owners. So one of the biggest hurdles that happens with small business owners and entrepreneurs is, one, they try to go to the bank to get their first business loan, or they are trying to raise capital. They're trying to figure out, will this business make sense? And the very first place that they are stumbling is having a financial plan, having projections that they can easily communicate to a potential lender, to a potential investor in their business. The other part that we see is the biggest struggle is that ultimately they are struggling through day to day the business decisions that they're making, how it impacts them from a profitability standpoint. So what Your Profit Playbook does is, it is a 6-week program where we help business owners to actually build the financial plan for their business. So we take them step by step through the process throughout the 6 weeks to generate a business plan that's not generic, a template that you download. No, we're diving deep every single week. So ultimately at the end of the 6 weeks, you have that financial plan for your business that is profitable. That's your roadmap to walk you through your daily, weekly, monthly decisions in your business.
Nice. Thanks. Dana?
Awesome. Yeah, that's phenomenal, and something that is so needed. And I love the fact that you said empowering earlier, because I think that's a word that we try to champion within CHIP, is about making sure that as people of color in financial services, we're championing each other. The biggest issue that we're solving is the fact that there's a lack of visibility for professionals of color in the financial industry. And because of that, it's sometimes, not looked at as a viable career path. For many of us, if you're not seeing yourself reflected, and as consumers, when we're not seeing ourselves reflected in the industry, how can we again know that this is a place for us? So we're looking to empower both sides of the table, empower consumers and empower professionals to be seen, to kind of take down the veil that's really blocking the financial industry. It still seems like this really weird space that we are really not sure on how it works, right? Who are all the different players? Understanding that your financial advisor, your tax professional, your accountant, your estate attorney, these are, typically tend to be different individuals. They don't always do the same things. And we want to make sure that people understand that. They understand their financial advisor and what their specific role is in their life, and how that's different from maybe working with a personal financial coach, right? And understanding who those people are relative to their lives. So when people come to our platform, you're filling out a brief questionnaire, and we're able to help you pair you with your best fit. So whether you're looking for that traditional advisory help, or you need someone to help you with your wills or trust or anything like that, I think it's important to be able to find those individuals and find them quickly, and then also just get the education and knowledge from them, because a lot of the industry and how advisors work is really taking the time to talk to you, not just from a product perspective, but really learn about who you are, right? We want to learn about your goals and what you want to do for the rest of your life, and how we can help you map out your financial life to meet those goals, right? It's not just about, hey, let's save money so I never see it again. It's no, if you want to start that business now, if you want to travel for the rest of your life, how do we help you to do that? And how do we create that safe space so you feel welcome, you feel empowered? So like Marguerite said, you're walking into these banks, and when you see things that don't make sense, you understand why you don't make sense and why they don't make sense to your life, and for you to continue building generational wealth.
And one of the things I love that you do, Dana, too, is it's about also being able to identify people that you resonate with, because finance is such a personal thing, right? We live in this society where it's almost taboo to talk about money, and, being able to identify, hey, these are people that can help you. These are people who look like you, right? And that's a part of what Dennis mentioned earlier, too, about like the building that trust back, right? So I love that. Love what you're doing, Dana.
Thank you. And just to piggyback off that too, it's, some of us are coming into this space and we may be first generation, right? And that could be first generation anything. So when you can walk into a room and not have to further feel like you have to explain yourself, or I have to sit down and, read some dissertation before I talk to someone, right? It makes such a big difference in the relationship that you're able to build with that professional, and does go back to trust.
Yeah. And I'm always thinking about, from my own personal perspective and experience, how much is enough to warrant the services that you have? I always think, I make okay money, but I don't know if I need a financial planner, or, should I be doing this on my own? Are there things that I'm missing because I'm not talking to a professional? Tell me, what I should be doing and why I'm doing it wrong.
Well, no one says you're doing anything wrong, Dennis. and I think that's probably it too. The first thing is like, you're not feeling like you're supposed to be in a certain place at certain aspects of life. I think as great as social media has been, it's definitely had its faults for that, right? We feel like, oh, well, at this age, I'm supposed to be doing this, or I should have this done, and all of these different things. And that right there stops us from sometimes moving forward on anything, right? And it could be something simple, but we get, too much in our heads and just kind of down on ourselves that we don't take the steps to acknowledge that and just start to move forward as a culture. And I think for us, it's really about acknowledging and being comfortable with where you are first, and what your plans are and what you want to do, and then kind of making that move to just sit down and talk to someone, because it's not an obligation to do anything. It's just a conversation to say, okay, well, this is where I'm at, this is what I've been doing, and this is where I want to go. How can you help me in this place of where I am, and not necessarily feel like, okay, well, if I step into this space and have this conversation, they're going to send me, some ridiculous bill. And that's really not the case. So we kind of want to make sure we're clearing that up too.
Yeah.
And I definitely say that what you brought up, Dennis, is one of like the first statements that I get from potential clients is they're like, well, I'm here because I need financial help. So how can I afford this? And one of the things that I always point out is, well, let's look at, can you really afford not to? What does it mean if you don't get financial support now, right? Does it mean that you're out of business in 1 year, 2 years? But in having support, does that mean that you're going to be that mature business 20 years later, right? When it comes to even, I will speak on the tax side a bit. One of the things that I always recommend to anyone, not only on the business side, but the professional side, is getting a certified tax professional, right? Because think about it, that is a cost. But if I put it to you this way, where I say, maybe you were supposed to pay, or you thought you were going to pay $20,000 in taxes at the end of the year. What if that certified tax professional who knows tax law, who knows the deductions, can change that situation around where you're getting a refund back, right? Then ask yourself, would it have been worth it? And I think that answer is a resounding yes. So it works similar, I think, with a lot of finance. We're here to help you grow that wealth, not take away from it.
Yeah. Right. Or even, God forbid a mistake happens, right? That's even more costly and can cost you years down the road. To your point. So you want to make sure that you're able to mitigate that through possibly talking to a professional, even if you think that you have it all figured out, even if you've done this for years, as we grow and build our wealth, our situations get even more and more complicated. And especially as entrepreneurs, which I know a lot of people watching are, it becomes time versus, do I really want to sit here and clean up my QuickBooks myself, right? Is it worth the time in me doing that? Because that's something you have to think about as well and consider.
Yeah. So as a small business owner, if I have an accountant, is that different than a tax professional who's going to specialize in maximizing my return?
Absolutely. And the way that I describe this is, think of it like your general practitioner that you go to your general doctor. You go to your general doctor for general things. But if you had a specific issue with your tooth, you're going to go to the dentist. If you have a specific issue with your eyes, you're going to go to the eye doctor. And it's so similar to that in the financial profession as well, I think, which is a little bit of something that people may not be aware of. And the way that I always describe it, if you're a small business owner, is I call it your financial trifecta. Your financial trifecta are the three of the critical people that you need in your business. Number one is your bookkeeper. Your bookkeeper is someone who's going to keep your financial records in order so that every time you swipe that card, they're putting it on the right shelf of, is it a marketing expense? Is it a travel expense? What have you. The second thing that I always recommend that you have is that tax professional. That tax professional is going to take what the bookkeeper does and help you to not only prepare your tax returns, but also help you to strategize with your taxes as well. And then the third piece, the critical resource to your trifecta, is your CFO. And your CFO, it doesn't have to be an expensive, outsource CFO services, getting their services for a few hours a month. But this CFO is going to help you to financially strategize in your business, right? Mm-hmm. Think of them as your thought partner. They're there beside you when you're making big decisions around capital, how to maximize that profitability. They're that more of the partner side, where the bookkeeper is kind of day-to-day keeping track of your records, tax professional focused on your tax, and that's your financial thought leader with you, is that CFO.
Yeah, that was fabulously laid out. And I echo all of that, because that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about these are separate individuals. And there are instances where you might have a, advisor who might be licensed in other areas, but you definitely want to ask. And I've run into, business owners in the past where when I was working as an advisor, where they would tell me that they had a financial advisor, but it was actually their accountant, right? So imagine what that does to us from a generational perspective, where you think that this person who is actually your accountant, but you're calling them your financial advisor, but they're not doing any types of investing for you, right? There's nothing going on to build on that generational wealth, but you think in your head that you're doing that, right? That becomes a dangerous situation when you look back and realize, oh my God, I had my business. I know I was taking care of it, but this person wasn't actually doing the things that I thought they were doing for me. And, that kind of goes through opportunity costs and market and things that you've missed out on by not being, more aware or more educated, even just asking the question, hey, can you explain to me exactly what you do so I can see who else I need to bring to the table? And make sure, if you can, that all these individuals know each other to some degree. And I think that's important too, that they're working together on your behalf so they all understand your situation, so that one person isn't recommending something that may not make sense for you from a tax perspective, right? All of those things start to go hand in hand.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to tell you I had a birthday recently. I won't tell you how old I am. Just know that I'm old. And I was this many days old in my life until, when I learned that I needed to have more than an accountant. So there's definitely some type of financial literacy disconnect, at least for me personally. I don't know if there's out there for the community at large, but how would you gauge the financial literacy of the Black community? And, is my experience unique, or, is there a lot of education that needs to happen?
Yeah, I definitely say that you are not alone, Dennis. I'm sure there was a lot of people on that were today years old and they learned that as well. But ultimately, we have to look at, and when you compare the financial literacy rates amongst people of color and our counterparts, what it absolutely boils down to are financial literacy rates are at a fraction of the percentage to our counterparts. Now, there's a lot of reasons as to why that is. A couple of those reasons really boil down to, if we look at historically how we were as a race involved in money conversations, our access to certain capital venues, right? As even, I'm going to say, women of color, a lot of time as a society, women were not allowed in certain fields of finance. We were not allowed to be a part of certain conversations in the household. And all of this is, when you think about it, it's compounded over generations, which is why we're a bit behind as it relates to those financial literacy rates. But one of the things that I will say is people of color are incredibly smart, incredibly talented, incredibly, have the capabilities to get up to speed as far as financial literacy rates. So what it boils down to is providing the avenues for the education, because when we get it, we get it. So ultimately, I think that what's happening now is, the great thing is when you open up opportunities for education and have those venues where they are open and accepting to people of color, we'll get there to those rates. But absolutely no, to shortly answer your question, yes, there's a disparity right now that exists. And until we can close the literacy gap, we're going to struggle to close the wealth gap. When you look at the household income compared to the literacy rate, the higher the household income rates are, there's a direct correlation to the financial literacy. So to solve the wealth gap, we got to solve for the literacy piece of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really just goes back to access and opportunity, right? And I think that's why a lot of us are jumping into fintech and financial literacy, because we're at a point where we're tired, right? We want our culture and our people to have the opportunity, have the access to this information, and we're not going to wait anymore. So if we have to be the ones to start these companies, we're going to do that to ensure that next generation. And, when we look out hundreds of years later, they're going to look at us and say, wow, how were these terms and how were these words even associated with us being less than, right? That's what we're trying to get through. We're trying to get to that next generation, not even being able to reconcile in their brains that we had issues, of the racial wealth gap and all of these different things. But it does come across in us being able to have that access and that opportunity. And that's what we're really trying to bring across is, yes, there is a large financial literacy gap, which is directly affecting the racial wealth gap here in America. But in order for us to ensure that we're doing that, we have to educate each other. We have to talk to each other. So if you're reading something and you're learning something on your own, share that with your friends. Have those types of group conversations. We have to get more comfortable and normalize the conversation around money, even if you're not, quote unquote, an expert in this space, but just even educating on someone or asking your friend, hey, do you work with an accountant or a tax professional? Or, hey, you started that business. Can you tell me a little bit about how you did that? Can you tell me, any coach or any type of educational books or audios or podcasts that you listen to? We need to get really good about sharing this information so we can start the process of making that gap as small as we can, until we've gotten to the point where it's closed. And I know we're a little bit ways away from that, but we have everything at our disposal. I mean, you look at our history and all the things that we were able to do when we worked together, right? There's nothing that we couldn't do. We were pretty much unstoppable if we're being candid, right? But at the same time, there's a lot that happened in history that just kind of broke us away from that. And I think the beauty of where we're seeing our culture now is that we're banding back together and we're tightening up these groups and we're ensuring that those around us have that access, have that opportunity, and we're actually the ones who are running and starting these companies. So I think there's going to be a lot of change.
Sorry, Dana, didn't mean I wanted to add to what you were saying there too, because I think it's us educating and empowering even from an individual perspective. But one of the things I'll add to that is I also think there's a bit of accountability too that we have to champion from the banks, from the lenders, right? Because ultimately there's so many predatory lending practices out there. We'll just start with that, right? Or even if we look back to like the recession, the real estate recession that kind of popped everything off in 2007-ish timeframe, and we look at the terms that some of these housing loans that were happening, right, that were allowed to happen, right? So, and who was the targeted group at some of these lending practices that happened? So I think we also, as a community,
Marguerite, don't get me started.
But I think as a community of color, right, too, we have to also push for accountability from some of the main lenders as well.
Yeah. So how do we use technology to level the playing field? I mean, it seems like there should be, some type of, cheat or a hack or an algorithm that we can use to catch up and get folks, educated and, starting to, down the path of wealth building,
I think we're starting to see a little bit of it. I mean, what I love about what's happening in technology that I don't think we talk about enough is this low code and no code space in this movement that I really feel is just going to change the tide when it comes to general wealth and just entrepreneurship. A couple of years ago, if you were a Black founder and you were trying to build your business, if you didn't necessarily have a tech background or didn't have some sort of understanding on how to build things, you were possibly waiting around to find your CTO or a friend, or having to spend large amount of money, which is probably coming from your 401k or somewhere that you were borrowing from to start that business or pay that person. But now with this low code and no code space, if you have an idea, you can go out there and just test it in a very low fashion, and then also from a very little expense on having to put a whole lot of money behind it. And that right there changes the dynamic for us in such an incredible way, right? It puts us in a position to now test our ideas, get them out into the market a lot faster, start to generate revenue off of those. And now look what we've done, right? We didn't necessarily have to go out and spend large sums of money to find that technical person or that technical co-founder before we got our ideas up and running. I mean, that right there in this low code, no code space changes the entire dynamic of how we're able to position ourselves in different sectors, in different markets, and just changes the playing field.
Yeah, no, good point.
Absolutely. And I also think that part of it too is kind of looking at some of the areas that people of color, and again, I focus on small businesses, but where the struggle comes in the most, and we're talking about things like, one, the ability to get capital, right? So if we look at the ability to get capital, I think technology has transformed the way that we can find investors for our companies, right? Things like crowdfunding, things like angel networks that are readily available for us now that was never there, call it, 15, 20 years ago. I think the other core piece of where people of color really struggle with their businesses and be able to use them to generate that generational wealth really comes around cash flow, right? It's something like 82% of businesses go out of business because of cash flow issues. But now we have things with technology that allow us to get fronted on our POs, right? So you can get that cash ahead of time where you're not waiting 180, sometimes even I've seen 365 days plus to get them, right? So to be able to have more of that working capital on hand, technology has made that possible, right? Or being able to really manage how your spend levels are happening, right? Having that insight into it with tools right there on your banking platforms. I think that has been critical as it relates to, again, getting access to capital. Again, we have a long way to still go there, but also just understanding the money flow within your business, and also how do we get that cash into ourselves a little bit than historically was possible.
Oh yeah. And from that accountability piece that you mentioned before, that makes us accountable, right? Because we can't ignore what we didn't want to look at before, right? Before it was easy to not have all these tech places look at our bank account and it was very general. Now we have reminders coming to us, right? We have all of these things that say, hey, maybe you shouldn't buy that this month, or this is what you have, and this is kind of how you set your parameters. So to a lot of what we're talking about, there is a level of accountability that you have to take personally, and things that you have to put in place, and just kind of knowing yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's a lot harder to say, I don't know.
It is, right?
I did not know. It's so much harder to say it.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to just throw the mail away, right? But now the mail is literally attached to us. So no more doing that. I'm challenging everyone watching. Let's set those notifications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking, I see that there's a question in the Q&A. Alex asks what organizations are being effective with building financial literacy for those who might want to support them or partner.
I'm going to go ahead and give a plug for myself here. We have the Finance Savvy CEO Foundation that is specifically focused on financial literacy for people of color who have small businesses, right? We particularly are focused on getting them that financial education that they need to really grow their generational wealth, create it for the first time. I think another organization that is really, really doing a good job of this is I Fund Women. I Fund Women is doing a great job as well, is helping to connect women to crowdfunding opportunities where everyone can learn about their business, where they can see it and invest in it if that's what they so choose to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also put a plug in for CHIP too. I think there's that misconception that we talked about earlier about understanding that a lot of the professionals, especially the ones on our platform, do a lot of financial education. So it's not just talking about product, but it's also getting to sit down with someone and understanding that education. We also just launched our FinTalk Live series, which we're working with different companies and organizations, which is run by the professionals on our platform, which I'm really excited to say and share. But that's another way to really get involved, right? We're going directly into companies and ensuring that, we're changing the perception of how professionals of color are viewed in the industry, but we're also ensuring that people get that knowledge and they see those 5 different disciplines that sit within our platform, and they're getting educated by those specific experts on, personal finance, on wealth, overall wealth management, on investing and insurance, taxes, accounting, and then also estate planning, which is your wills and your trusts. But you're hearing from the experts in those specific disciplines.
Oh, good stuff. And we got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one last question for the both of you, which is starting out on a financial planning journey. Obviously, you both have services that cater slightly different or a little bit of overlap. But for the general population, the average Joe working, 9 to 5, maybe have a little bit of savings, but not much, little 401k, not much. What should we do? Should I be taking my money and throwing it into Bitcoin and NFTs, or should I be, saving it away in IRAs and, loading up and diversifying my 401k? What do you guys do? And what do you see as kind of some best practices and some just general advice, realizing everybody's situation is different, but just some general advice on where to start?
Yeah. I would say the first place you need to start is actually determining where are you focused? What is your goals right now? Because that is going to dictate the very next step that you make. If you tell me, hey, Marguerite, my goal right now is I have a kid that ultimately, is going to college in 2 years. I have nothing. I just have my small business. My advice to you is going to be so different than if right now your goal is just getting started. You are, call it 21, fresh out of college. So what you need to get key on first, and it's the very first stage of financial planning, not only for small businesses, but if you are just don't have a business as well, it all boils down to what's the goal we're trying to achieve? What is that vision that you have? Because I can tell you, Dennis, if you take any action versus, maybe investing in the next, what's the big thing, Dogecoin or whatever it is, right? If you take that action before knowing what you're marching towards, you could find yourself in a total different direction than you intended. So I would say that's the first step you need to take. Figure out where you're going, figure out what that goal is.
Yeah. And I think that I agree absolutely with that, because that's the thing that's overlooked, right? We always want to look at the product. So where are we taking our money and putting it? But you really can't start there. You do have to start with an understanding of self, because you can take your pot of money that you have and put it into something and hope that it does the same thing that your friend told you that they got from that. But you're not going to necessarily have that same type of return on whatever that particular investment is. In your situation could be completely different from theirs, right? That $500 that they possibly lost is a really big loss to you, right? That could be part of your rent or part of something that you were saving for. So if you're not understanding your goals and your situation and what you need to do as far as the next year or two or five of your life, it's not going to help you just going to invest in different things. I mean, you definitely want to make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that you have at work as far as your 401ks and being able to max out your IRAs if you can contribute to those, and then kind of start to branch out when you're ready to look at different things that might be a little bit more risky, but also understanding that do those things actually make sense for you, and does the amount of money that you're putting into them also makes sense. I mean, I love this big push around crypto and Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all these other things, but you have to make sure that you understand the product itself, and you have to make sure that you understand the money that you're putting into it, and most importantly, why, right? The why is the key. So make sure you can answer a lot of those questions for yourself.
And I'll even say, Dana, too, like, as you mentioned the why, and like, as we both talk about the goal setting, like, where are we going? I think even if you struggle with that and you're like, Marguerite and Dana, like, I don't even know what my goal is. I would tell you, even before that, the best thing you can focus on is getting your financial house in order so that you can understand what your finances even look like, right? So if you could just take even the smallest step forward and say, all right, let me sit down and understand what is the inflow of cash that I have coming in every single month. What is the requirements that I have from different obligations, such as maybe it's debt or maybe it's just your normal monthly bills. Get your finances organized first, because that's going to make it a lot clearer to you as far as what's possible and what's not possible.
Oh, yeah, because when you do that, you definitely see what you actually have versus what you thought you did. And honestly, sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes you realize you have more money than you actually did. So,
and sometimes ignorance is bliss, and Amazon Prime is.
No, we're not. Dennis, we're not doing that. That's not why we had this conversation. And Joe can shut off Dennis's microphone.
Okay. Well, I will curtail my Prime spending, I promise. But thank you both. And I'll. I don't know if we have it. I'm sure you have it in your profiles, links to your respective websites for your respective services. Definitely follow these ladies and the services they provide. And apparently I need to find myself a tax consultant because, that's the thing now. Okay.
That's why we're here. That's why CHIP exists, right? This is what we do.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you very much, both of you, and enjoy the rest of the day. And for everyone else, we'll be back on the main stage in 15 minutes. Take care.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, you.
Dana. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.